All right, Game 5 of the finals, and it was on. Would this be the final game? Denver needing one more win. The Joker and the Nuggets, one win away from the title. And Jimmy Buckets in the Heat facing their last supper if they did not win. That was the setup. Denver, a sizable favorite, although they opened up in some places a 10-point favorite, down to 8.5 or so by the time the game began in Colorado. And did you watch? Based on the ratings, the numbers have gone down. There are not as many people watching, or at least the audience had waned. The interest had waned. Not in Denver, of course, where we are bloviating the nighttime away there as the epicenter of the NBA. So if you didn't watch, Nikola Jokic getting it done. Although he didn't have an amazing, 50-point, 40-rebound type game, but Nikola Jokic, 28 points, 16 rebounds, and 4 assists, and the Nuggets rally back. They were down by double digits. They rallied back in the second half and beat the Heat. And turn out the lights. The party's over for Miami as Denver wins by 5. So if you bet on the Heat plus the points, you won the bet. But Denver wins the hunk of metal. They win the hunk of metal. 47 years in Colorado as an NBA franchise, and bupkis, but now here they are standing atop the Rocky Mountain as the champions of professional basketball. So let us discuss the question: what are your initial takeaways from the Nuggets being crowned NBA champions? So I've got trumpet, Looney Tunes, and Ferris wheel. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to make a plate of Rocky Mountain oysters, which you might remember a couple years ago in that whole bubble thing. I had to eat Rocky Mountain oysters because I bet against the Nuggets, and it did not go well for me at that point. So when you ask the question, what are the takeaways from the Nuggets being crowned the champions of the NBA? So we'll start with number one. Number one. It's a bit delayed, but we got it. We got it in. That's all that matters. So Nikola Jokic, we'll start with that. He got railroaded out of the regular season MVP award. It was one of the most fugazi things we've seen in some time in basketball. That's saying something. The Joel Embiid chatter. There were people who seemingly know what they're talking about, who claimed you can't give Nikola Jokic a third consecutive MVP because that'll put him on the all-time great list. Okay, how did that go? Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. Yeah, not good there. And now it is like a parade of clowns. How perfect is it? Jokic goes out there, dominates the NBA playoffs. Nuggets win the required 16 games to win the NBA championship. And he's out there in Denver, and you've got ABC's Mark Jackson, who didn't even have Nikola Jokic on his MVP ballot. You've got Lisa Salters, who claimed in an interview that she'd never even seen Jokic play. And you got all these bozos there on these national TV outfits. It was a major flex by Nikola Jokic, obviously. But instead of the regular season hardware, he picked up a massive playoff goodie bag, a really big playoff goodie bag, clicking on all cylinders. Jokic, what he's really doing is like he's playing the trumpet. Right? It's like he's in the best damn band in the land, and he dotted the I. Not in Ohio, in champion in this particular series and all that comes with that. And so he gets a victory lap. Jamal Murray, a fine Canadian lad. Also, after a couple of gnarly injuries years ago, he gets to celebrate. And then, how about the coach? It's a blessing and a curse, right? When you're an NBA coach and you win a championship, and Michael Malone, Hardo, NBA coach, fired in Sacramento, which ought to be a prerequisite to getting a better job when you're fired in Sacramento. But you look around, this guy spent like 20-plus years as an assistant coach, working his way up the ranks, becomes a head coach. So now the blessing is you've won a championship. The curse is your job security just took a tremendous hit, and that Michael Malone might want to sell his house at this point, or at least see what the real estate market is like there in Denver. So, oh, there's no way. The Nuggets are never going to get rid of Michael Malone. What are you talking about? Okay, go contact Coach Bud and the male nurse and see how that went. See how that job security went after winning a championship. But Denver was so much better. They were measurably better than Miami in this series. It was a huge mismatch. And unlike the previous series the Heat had played in where it didn't translate, it translated here. The Nuggets, they didn't play perfect in every game, but that's really an example of how dominant they were. The Celtics didn't play well against Miami. They lost. Denver didn't play well in this game. They still won in this game. They didn't play well in game two. They still had a chance to win game two. Miserable game by the Nuggets for the most part. Closeout game. They still end up in the winner's circle. They missed 10 foul shots. 23 missed three-point shots. Clankety-clank. This was textbook tight-took-us syndrome by the Denver Nuggets, and it didn't matter, right? They had a one-way ticket to Panic City, and they still ended up winning the game and winning the championship, and all of that was just subterfuge. Now, page 2 here. Let's go to the losing locker room. Now, that's the story, the losing locker room. So is this the end of Playoff Jimmy? Playoff Jimmy. So I'm going to go no on this. It is not the end of Playoff Jimmy. I love the way Jimmy Butler plays. This was not his masterpiece. This was more like a finger painting. And continue to play that way. Perseverance, moxie, grit, all that stuff. It's all great. But clearly Jimmy Butler met his match in the NBA Finals here. He did not have the afterburners and did not have that. But you got to look at the micro and the macro with Jimmy Butler and playoff Jimmy and all that stuff, because in this game, he didn't make enough plays for the first 40-plus minutes of the game, still within striking distance in the fourth quarter. But Jimmy Butler, 5 of 18 in the game, not good enough. In the second half, he was 3 of 10. He made some shots late in the game, but it was not enough. He also had a crucial turnover late in the game. But it's really like the Looney Tunes when you talk about Jimmy Butler and this whole episode in his career, right? It's like the Looney Tunes. What I mean by that is you that classic coyote. Sometimes you're the coyote, right? Sometimes you're the roadrunner. And in this case, he's the coyote. He's still trying to figure things out. But in the long term, you still got the macro, right? Jimmy Butler's pretty solid resume on teams that are perceived to be lesser teams in Miami, talent-wise. Now, this is the first legitimate title run for Jimmy Butler. Does anyone disagree? Nobody who knows basketball will disagree. 2020 was counterfeit. It's played at a resort in Orlando, outside Orlando. They're a Mickey Mouse resort. That was bogus. This is legit. So this is something you can put on your resume there. And in the short term, we'll remember that Jimmy Butler took a ride on the Vomit Comet in this game and several games in the NBA Finals. But long term, the long game, it will not be something that is brought up very much, because you look at around, there's plenty of the play of blame game. There's plenty of blame to go around for Miami. And it's a Cinderella story, right? It's a Cinderella story there. And the glass slipper turning back into a crappy shoe there at midnight for a bunch of people. Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Duncan Robinson, those guys sucked at a time you cannot suck. Combined, took 17 three-point shots and made 2 of them. 2 of 17 from three-point range for the star duo. I don't want to say star. The key reserves and secondary actors for Miami. 2 of 17 from three-point range. How about Bam Adebayo? Got off to a big start. Looked like Wilt Chamberlain at the start of the game. In the second half, he took 7 shots. He made 1 of them. He had 2 more points than you had in the second half. All right, final point. So are the Nuggets now on the cusp of being the next NBA dynasty? Woohoo! No. We're going to go N to the O on this, and I have already started to see it. Anytime a team wins a championship, it is the boilerplate story that you toss out at any point. right? Any point a team wins, you're like, oh, we're going all the way and all that. You're going to do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. But I'm going to go no on that. As Larry David says, I don't think so. And I am never wrong about this stuff, never. Denver will be a perennial contender in the Western Conference for the next several years, but I'm not ready to put them in the dynasty category. Here's Michael Malone, the coach of the Nuggets, commenting, and he's the one that right after the game, before the body was even cold for Miami, he went out there and was talking about coming back and doing it again. But here's the Nuggets head coach. Listen.
Pat Riley said something many years ago. I used to have it up on my board when I was a head coach in Sacramento, and it talked about the evolution in this game and how you go from a nobody to an upstart, and you go from an upstart to a winner, and a winner to a contender, and a contender to a champion. And the last step is, after you're a champion, is to be a dynasty. So we're not satisfied. We accomplished something this franchise has never done before, but we have a lot of young, talented players in that locker room, and I think we just showed through 16 playoff wins what we're capable of on the biggest stage in the world.
You know what this reminds me of? You know when you were a kid, and I don't know if my parents were like this, you're not in first grade anymore, Benjamin. And then when you got to second or third grade, you're not in second grade anymore. You're now whatever. They always push the envelope a little further. That's what Michael Malone's doing. But I have the Nuggets as a perennial contender, but there's a large gap. There's a lot you have to traverse in mileage to go from perennial contender to dynasty. Because you got to win 3 championships in a 5 or 7 year period. Now Denver's got 1, so they got 5 or 6 years to play with here to win 2 more championships. It's a noble table to get at, and it's a mixed bag, because if you're somebody that loves youth, you're like, oh great, Nikola Jokic is 28, Jamal Murray's 26, Michael Porter Jr., who was spotty, 24 years old. All 3 are under contract for the next several years, and the Nuggets are expected to give the western part of Colorado to Jamal Murray in a max contract, and that's all great. But there is a caveat on this. And we'll end this diatribe with this. And while I'm not willing to go dynasty for the Denver Nuggets because I'm not a prisoner of the moment, you also have to remember that we are in the era of musical chairs by design. The powers that be at the NBA have designed it. You know how in politics you have gerrymandering, which messes with the election and who can win and who can't win? Well, in the NBA, they've done some gerrymandering to try to limit the dynasties, and they put guardrails up to prevent dominance. And they want it to be like a Ferris wheel. Adam Silver and his henchmen want it to be like a Ferris wheel, where you're Ferris wheel, where you go up and you're the champion and you slowly go back down. It's like a Ferris wheel, up and all that. And so you rise up and then you go back down. For example, Denver, because of this success, they're going to have to pay Jamal Murray a big contract based on what they already have. They will be in this second wave of the tax threshold, which means more restrictions will be tightened on the Nuggets. They will not have the mid-level exemption. Woohoo! Can't add a player that way. They won't be able to stack contracts, aggregate contracts in order to make a trade work out. So pretty much what you got is what you got if you're the Nuggets going forward here. And even if you're able to navigate the hiccups involved in the salary cap rules that are put in to keep you from winning again, you then also go from the hunter to the hunted, which is a much different thing, and you have the winner's curse, which we have seen. Look, Milwaukee won the championship a couple years ago, and this season in the playoffs, the Greek freaks are like, there are no winners, there are no losers. That's how far they've come from winning a championship in Milwaukee. The same thing can happen to the Denver Nuggets.